This is Gemara Zevachim Daf Dalid. I'm holding at the very top of Dalid Amid Aleph. All the learning for this month, the month of Elul, has been generously sponsored as an incredible schos. Aliyas Neshama for a very close friend of the Daf's mother, Esther Reyzel Basra Meir B'siyata Dishmaya, the incredible Koyach HaTorah, the Koyach HaTorah of learning with a vigor and enthusiasm, as we're still at the beginning of a Masechta, should bring an incredible Aliyas Neshama. As well, I'm sure by now many people notice we're trying to start getting back into the Zichru Simanim, whether it's you like the Simanim, whether it's the Chazara, but it's definitely an incredible tool. Highly recommended. You don't have to listen to my 5-minute share. Just go to zichru.com and enjoy the incredible Chazara. So here we go. And we are on the top of Dalit Amud Aleph. And the Gemara asks, Minolan debi'inan zvicha lishma. How do we know that you need zvicha lishma? Ashchita lishma. We started the Masechta called Zevachim al karbanos. She Zevachim shalei lishma. If you shech them shalei lishma, it's kshera. Just it doesn't work for the Bailam b'shem chayva. So says the Gemara, what's the makar? The top Rashi points out lechatchila dimi ma'isiv zecha lemi varshi be'avaydais. Rashi says it can't just simply be because of the inherent necessity for to follow your words, tishmar, because it doesn't say which avoidais it's referring to. So now we have to know. We start with zvicha shchita. We're going to go through the dalid critical avoidais, shchita, kabbalah, haylacha, and zrika. Shchita, shechting the animal. Kabbalah, catching the blood. Haylacha, walking with the blood. And zrika, sprinkling the blood. Says the Gemara, Damarkra, says the Torah, Vim Zavach Shlamim Karbanai. And if you shecht his Zevach Shlamim, the word Vim Zavach teaches us, Shetei Zvicha L'Shem Shlamim, that the shchita has to be for the sake of the Shlamim. Says the Gemara, how do you know? V'del Mahainu Shemayu. Maybe the name of the karban is Zevach Shlamim. So how do you know that the word Zevach is an extra word to connote that it needs to be Lishma? Says the Gemara, because we have another pasuk. Midich from the fact that the pasuk says, Hamakriv es Adam Hashlamim. He brings the blood of the Shlamim. Hazayrek es Dam Hashlamim. And the pasuk also says he throws the blood of the Shlamim. V'loik sev, and in those psukim it does not say Zevach. Ve'hocha, and over here in our pasuk Vim Zevach Shlamim Karbana, it does say Zevach. Shema Mina, that's the Raish Zvicha L'Shleim Shlamim. So Mikar number one for the Shchita, that you need the Shchita, the Zvicha L'Shma, is from Zevach Shlamim, the actual word Zevach. Ashkhan Zvicha, says the Gemara 6 lines down, Sharavaydas Minalan. How do we know all other of the Dalit critical Avaydas? V'chitim, and now the setup of the Gemara is going to be as often repetitive, so let's follow carefully. V'chitim aleilif mizvicha. Maybe we should learn out the Kabbalah, the catching the blood, the Haylacha, the walking with the blood, the Zrika, the sprinkling the blood. Learn it out from the Zvicha. Says the Gemara, wait, mal Zvicha, shkei nifsla, shaloi l'shem oichlen bepesach. There's a special chumrah, and this is always the way. Whenever you're learning out A from B, you have to know, are they in the same playing field? Says the Gemara, if I could show you that there's a maila, there's a chumrah, there's a detail in which one is different than the next, then you're not able to learn one from the other. So says the Gemara, the shchita is different. Why? Because the shchita is possible if you do it shaloi l'shem oichle when it comes to the karban pesach, and that nikuda, that din is a din specifically by the shchita. So that shows us that shchita is on a different playing field. So maybe only shchita needs lishma, but not all other avodas. Says the Gemara, Ela Amar Cross, we prove it from a pasuk. Hamakriv dam shlamim. The pasuk, the Torah says you bring the dam of the shlamim. Shetei Kabbalah, the catching of the blood. L'shem shlamim. should bring for the sake of a shlamim. Says the Gemara, but the pasuk doesn't say the word Kabbalah. So why doesn't the Torah write this by Kabbalah? Excuse me, that's not the kasha. Excuse me. The pasuk says Hamakriv es adam hashlamim. Hamakriv means you sacrifice literally the blood of the shlamim. And Rashi points out, Kabbalah, has to be talking about the Kabbalah because the only way to bring the blood is if you catch the blood. So we see that it's talking about catching the blood has to be for what? The dam, l'shem, the shlamim. So says Gemara, okay, Gavaldik Makar. So just write it by the Kabbalah and don't write it by the Leilev Shchita Minei, learn not Shchita from there. Says Gemara Shabdikal and Mifrach, we have a different kasha. Mali Kabbalah, Kabbalah has a Maila. Shkem Psula Bizar, V'isha. Kabbalah cannot be done by a woman or a non-kohen. Whereas, when we know the halacha is, and this will come out clear in a few moments, shchita is yes kosher by a non-kohen and a woman. Which of course brings out a unique din, that as much as the shchita is perhaps the most critical avodah, shchita is going to have incredible chumras, yet shchita is also kosher by Yisrael and a woman. Whereas when it comes to the Kabbalah, Kabbalah seemingly not at high level, but yet Kabbalah will be kosher by a woman or a Yisrael. Says the Gemara, Ashchan Shchita v'Kabbalah. So now we have a Makar for Shchita. Now we have a Makar for Kabbalah. Says the Gemara. But where do we know all other Avaydais? I just want to highlight each line that the Kabbalah is l'shem shlamim. So now it says the Gemara, where do we know Zrika, the next Avodah on our list? Now it's true that we skipped Halacha, but let's get there. Zrika Minolan, V'chi, Tema Leilav Mihani, learn it out from Shchita, learn it out from Kabbalah, but Malahani, Shchita and Kabbalah, Shekin Tu'unais Safain. They have to be done in the north. V'yashtan B'chatois Hapenimius. And the halacha is, there's a din of Shchita, there's a din of Kabbalah by the Chatos Hapenimius, which is not true when it comes to Zrika. Ela Markra Hazoyrik es dam hashlamim. From there we learn out Shtei Zrika l'shem shlamim. So Makar number 3. Now we know 3 of the 4 avodas have to be lishma. Ask the Gemara the same kasha we asked by Kabbalah v'lechtav rachmana b'zrika v'leilav minei. Learn out from it. Answers the Gemara b'shem dikal and mifrach. You know why we can't do that? Because we can ask a kasha. Mal zrika shekain chayav aleh zar misa. Zrika has its own level of extreme chumrah. That if a non-kohen does zrika, he's chayav misa. Says Gemara Ashchan Kulu halacha minal. And what about the 4th avodah? What about carrying the dam? Where do we know that also has to be lishma? V'chitema, maybe you can tell me Kulu, learn out from the other 3. But malekulu shkin avodah she'i efshar livatala. The other 3 avodas are critically important. They can never be negated. You can never have a carbon without those 3. Whereas Taimer b'hayilacha she'efshar levatala, how is that possible in a scenario that the shchita is done right next door to the mizbeach? You'll not have to carry it. You'll be right there. So hayilacha is an avodah that could be levatala, and therefore what's the makar that has to be lishma? Ela markra vehekriv esakol hamizbecha v'amar mar zu hayilacha severim lekevesh. The pasuk says you should be makriv. Pasuk says you should sacrifice. What does that mean? So we learn what that means is it's referring to the carrying the ivarim to the ramp. Says the Gemara Vitanya, and we learned in our brayso v'ekrivu. The pasuk says v'ekrivu. Zu. This teaches us Kabbalah Sadam. This is the acceptance of the blood. V'apik rachmana belashain haylacha. So why does the Torah use the lashain, the terminology of carrying, lemeimer, to teach us the haylacha loy sefka mechlal Kabbalah, that haylacha is a part of the Kabbalah, and therefore once we know that the Kabbalah, of course, has to be done lishma, so too we're learning now that the same is going to be true when it comes to the haylacha. And now we have our makar that all 4 of the critical avodas have to be done lishma. But now continues the Gemara, and the Gemara says, "Va'ashkechan shinoi kodesh, shinoi bailim min Allah." And it's similar as we've seen previously. There's always two elements of lishma. There's an element of lishma, shinoi kodesh, when you do it for the wrong carbon. There's an element of lishma, shinoi bailim, if you do it for the wrong bailim. Both of them we know have to be lishma. So says the Gemara, what's the makar for shinoi bailim? Amar Rav Pinchas, Breder Rav Ami, Amar Akra says the Torah Basa Zevach Taidas Shalomov. And for there we learn now Zvicha L'Shem Taida, that the carbon has to be for the sake of a Taida. But wait! We don't need that! We already learned on the top of the Amid. On the top line, we already learned the Makar that the Zvicha has to be Lishma. So says the Gemara, if we don't need the Makar for Shinoi Kaidesh, why not? Because we already learned it out. So we learn it out for the Shinei Bailim, and that's going to be the Makar, that you have to have the right Bailim in mind. Asks the Gemara, this drasha we need for a different purpose, as we learned in a Braisa. Ubisar Zevach Taida Shlamov. Says the Pasik, and the meat of the Zevach is a Taida that is a Shlamim. So the Pasik says a Taida, which is a Shlamim. Sabachanin Oimer teaches Abachanin Misham Rav Eliezer. Balilame Taida Sheshachta L'Shem Shlamim. It's teaching us that a Taida, which is shechted as a Shlamim, is Ksheira. But a Shlamim Sheshachta L'Shem Taida is going to be Psula. Ma Hefresh Bein Zelazeh. Why is one good and why is one not good? Why if I shecht my Shlamim as a, if I shech my taida as a shlamim, it's kosher. But I shech my shlamim as a taida, no. If I shech my taida as a shlamim, it's kosher. If I shech my shlamim as a taida, it's not kosher. Says the Gemara, taida kriya shlamim, but v'ein shlamim kriya taida. But what's the point? The point is that, what? We see in this brayso that our pasuk that we just thought was an extraneous pasuk that can teach us shinoi bailim is not extra at all. We need to have, we need it for this other limud. Says the Gemara, and we learn it out, mi zevach kamrinon. We learn it out from the word zevach, and that word is still going to be extra. But ask the Gemara, but wait, but we still need it. Chatas v'asham minayin. Says the Brais, already know chatas and asham. The halacha, you can only eat it for one day and one night. Hamulaymer zevach. Answers Gemara, ubasar taida shlam of zevach. My zevach. Why is the word zevach in the beginning? Shema mina tarti. Says the Gemara, okay. So ashkechan. So after all the dust settles, zvicha. We learned that when it comes to shinei bailim, with regard to the zvicha, that if the shchita is done for the wrong bailim, it's not going to work. But ask the Gemara, shar avodas minol, and what do we know? All other avodas. V'chi teman, if you're going to tell me, leilev mi zvicha, if you're going to tell me, learn now from shchita, which this is how we mentioned, this is the circle that we're going back to the top of them. In Ma'al zvicha, shem paisel, shem eichlin pesach. Zvicha has its own chumrah. Nemra b'zvicha b'shinei kodesh. So says the Gemara, I'll tell you how you learn it out. It says zvicha shinei kodesh. Nemra zvicha shinei bailim. So now that we have two limudim, so ma zvicha mura b'shinei kodesh, what do we see? After all the limudim, after we learned out that all four avoiders, what do we learn out? Loi chalakta, there's no difference between zvicha l'shar avoiders. And once we know that that's the way it is by shinoi Kodesh, and now we have a pasuk by Shinei Ba'alim. Zvicha mur b'Shinei Ba'alim. Lo techalik ben bein Zvicha l'shar avodas. It says the Gemara, Ikal Mifrach, 3 lines in the bottom. Ikal Mifrach, we can learn out to Shinei Kodesh. Shigem psula begufa. Shinei Kodesh has an inherent psul. Shinei Kodesh is a paslos in the carbon itself. V'yashnan ba'arba avodos, and all 4 avodos are what? Are intrinsic of the carbon itself. And v'yashnan lacher misa, and they all apply after misa. And v'yashna b'tzibur kibiyachid, and they all apply, whether it's with regard to a carbon tzibur or a carbon yachid. Va'afal gav titarti lav dafka. Even though two of the things I just told you are not actually precise, but titarti miya dafka. And therefore, the overarching question that we're going to get back to in a moment is the Gemara is asking, so how are we going to be able to learn it out from the zvicha? Before we get there, first the Gemara explains, what does it mean tarti dafka and tarti lav dafka? Why are you telling me that Shinei Bailim is not a psalm Guf? Machshava be'alma. Your thinking is why? Because what is it? That was all Shinei Kodesh. Shinei Kodesh, we said, are all paslas and etzem carbon. But Shinei Bailim, we're saying what is not. Why? Because Shinei Bailim is you're just thinking for a different Bailim. Says the Gemara, but Shinei Kodesh, Navi Machshava be'almahu. Shinei Kodesh is also intent. Ella, so explains the Gemara, Kivan da'achshava pasla. Rather, we have to explain it as follows. Since it's the thought that is what's making it possible, since it's the thought to eat it for the wrong carbon, hachenami kiven da'achshava pasla, should be the same thing. And therefore, shinei bailim and shinei kodesh be'etzem in this regard are the same, because it's really not any more paslas in the gufa carbon by shinei bailim, by Shinei Kodesh, any more than Shinei Bailim, because both of them, what is the paslis? The paslis is a machshava, says the Gemara. Rav Pinchas breder Rav Mari that he holds Shinei Bailim nachar Misa. There's also a concept of Shinei Bailim after Misa, after the animal is killed, then as well. That's also not a chilik. What was the second chilik to Shinei Kodesh and Shinei Bailim on the bottom of Amud Aleph? Is that it's nachar Misa? Says the Gemara, it's not true. But says the Gemara, you're right. Two of these chalukim don't exist. But tarti miyayika lemifrach. Two of them are kashas. So says the Gemara, so we have a problem. How can we learn out shinoi bailim from shinoi kodesh? Whether it's because it's equal biyachid ube tzibur. Says the Gemara, Elam Rav Ashi, Amar Kra, we need to have another pasuk. Says the Torah, and it's accepted for the kapara. Veloy al chaveiroi. V'nir tzoloi. There's haratza, there's a kapara for him, but not for his friend, and that's going to be the makar for Shini Bailim being a problem by the Dalid avoidis. Says the Gemara, really, this pasuk can teach us this? We need it for a brisa. What does the brisa say? And I see the highlighting pause for a moment. Hopefully he'll get back on board in a moment. What does the brisa say? V'nir tzaloi lechaper alav. And it should be a kapara for the one who gives the kapara. And the word alav teaches us upon him. Rabbi Shimon Omer says, Rabbi Shimon, Esha'alav chayv achriyusa, v'she'ein olav in a chayv achriyusa. So what do we see? We see that we need this limud for another drasha. How can you tell me it's utilized for Shinei Bailim? V'amar Rav Yitzchak, and teaches Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, my taima, kiman da'amar, olai, kamandi ta'in le akatvei dami. Since he says the carbon is a lie upon me, it's as if he poured it on his shoulders. Personal liability. So that's how Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi says it's only that which is Allah of chayav achriyusai. But says the Gemara, we're back to square one. Where do we know Shinoi Bailim by the Dalit Avoidais? Rav Ashi mivinir tzaloi lechaper kamar, from the extra pasuk of vinir tzaloi lechaper Allah. That's how he learns out Masha the Achrais upon him, and the extra love can teach us the din of Shinoi Bailim. So that is number 2. Ashkechan, says the Gemara, Zvicha, Uzrika. We found the first two avodas have to be what? Have to be for the Bailim. That is a din of Shinoi Bailim. By the Shchita, we learned in Amud Aleph. By the Zrika, we just learned just now. Kabbalah minol, and where do we know the Kabbalah has to be done for this Baal? Maybe you're going to tell me that it's Zvicha Zrika, but now Mal Zvicha Zrika Shkein. Avodah Shchayv Labachotz. Elam Rav Ashi Asya Me'ayel Nazir. Says Rav Ashi, let's turn out from Me'ayel Nazir. Dichsev es Ayel Yaseh Zevach Shlamim, and the ayel should be made as Zevach Shlamim. which teaches that the asiyah of the carbon, the doing of the carbon has to be l'shem shlamim. Now, what's the doing? The doing is all the avodas, and it has to be what l'shem shlamim, and not for something else. Says the Gemara. But do we need this libud to teach me that the etzem avodah has to be for the shlamim? No, because we learned that the whole Amud Aleph. We already learned it out. So it's going to learn out by all the other avodas. Kabbalah ilacha also have a problem of shinoi ba'alim. Amar le'Ravacha bar Abba l'Rava Ema Yaseh klal. Says the Gemara, not so fast. It says Yaseh, it should be made, which seemingly says all the avodos, but then the pasuk says zevach prat. Klalu prat, anytime you have a generalization in a pasuk, and then you have a specification in the pasuk, what's the rule? Ein bechlal elamashe beprat. It's only that which was specified. Zvichain midiachrini loy. So says the Gemara, l'chayra, the only thing we can learn out is the zvicha, not all other avodos. And we already knew Zvicha. We already knew Kabbalah. We're looking for Zrika. Says the Gemara, Iksiv Ya'aseh Shlomim Zevach, then Kedekamer. But Ashlev Ya'aseh Zevach Shlomim, Havelei Klal, She'inoi. Then it comes out, it's a Klal She'inoi Moli. That's not complete. And now it's another rule of Klal She'inoi Moli. Ain't done Naisei B'Klal Prat. We don't know the Klal Prat. And therefore it's not limited by the word Zevach. And therefore it can be the Makar that the other avodas need to be without shinoi ba'alim. Ravina Amar Lelam Danim. Really, we could learn a klal uprat. However, V'la Hashem Chaziru klal. The pasuk ends off that it's done la Hashem, which is a klal. So then you have a klal uprat uklal, and then it doesn't get the limit of the prat, and it could be general. One second. Slow down. You have a klal, upratu klal. The klal was zevach. The klal was yaaseh. The prat was zevach. The klal was Hashem. But says the Gemara, the two are not equal. The first klal, yaaseh, is marble all the different forms of the avodah. V'sulai, and nothing more. Klal Basra that says Kol Hashem, which is what? Va'afilu shvicha shirayim v'aktaris emurim, adds on even more things, even more than the Daled critical avodas. Adds on even burning the carbon, even burning the emurim. So says the Gemara, how can you have a klal part of klal when the two halves of your limud are not equal? So says the Gemara, answers Ravina, Hatani Dvei Rabbi Yishmael, Bechlali Uprati. Darish ki agavna. Tanveri Shmuel says that even though the klal upratu klal are not equal, we still could learn a klal upratu klal. So now the Gemara goes back to what Ravina was saying. He was in the middle of talking. Klal upratu klal yatadana kina prat ma brahma furash avodo bina lishma. Just like the prat, just like zevach is an avodah, and it needs to be lishma. So now I can learn out the shar avodah, savkol avodah, and ubeina lishma, and that's going to be our mekar. That the zrika, that the halacha will also have to be lishma and can't have a shinei bailim. Ask the Gemara, weitima abram mefurash avodah v'chayavin aleha bachotz. If you're going to tell me that, wait, the prat has this special dinted, it's chay bachotz, avkol avodah v'chayavin bachotz. But which avodas are chayav achot? Shita uzrika in, but Kabbalah v'halacha loy. So says the Gemara, we have a problem. We shouldn't be able to learn out Kabbalah or halacha. Inami, or maybe mabram vurish davar aton safon v'yeshta b'chatois habenimius. I'll tell you another thing about shchita. It has to be done by safon. It's by chatas habenimius. Avkol aton sav v'yeshta b'chatas habenimius, which is what shchita v'Kabbalah in zrika loy. So says the Gemara, this klal upratu klal is problematic. Answers the Gemara, says the Gemara, you're right. We have two ways of learning this klal upratu klal. Shekulineim v'yavoy shneim. and therefore we can learn out both of them. Lishna achrina, another way of learning this, v'chada chada, lishna achrina, v'chada chada teku b'milsa, each one is in its place, meaning we can learn both. Iba yisema zrika midravashi nafka, that we can learn out zrika from the din of Ravashi. That's going to be how we learn out the dalit avoidais have a din, they can't have a shinei bailim. Stop over here. I'll pick it up from here. B'siyata dishmai.